All right, let's dive in. Today, we're breaking down some pretty explosive claims from a viral report. Claims about a massive crisis that might be unfolding inside Iran's military. We're talking defiance, desertions, and a regime that's apparently feeling the heat from every direction. Let's get into it. So, where does this all start? Well, according to the source, it kicks off with this one single Iranian soldier who was sentenced to death. And his crime? He allegedly refused an order to shoot civilians. This one decision, this one act of defiance, really sets the stage for everything else we're about to unpack. And that brings us right to our first section, a soldier's defiance. Because you see, these reports are arguing that this isn't just about one guy's story. Nope, they're saying it's a symptom, a sign of a much, much wider breakdown happening within the Iranian armed forces.
So it really makes you wonder, right? What happens when soldiers, the very people meant to enforce the rules, just stop obeying orders? When that core foundation of military power, that unquestioning obedience, starts to crack, what does a regime do to hold on to control?
Well, the answer, according to this report, is pretty brutal. Execute one to terrify the rest. But here's the twist. The analysis suggests that this tactic isn't working. It's not fixing a broken army. In fact, it might actually be speeding up the collapse by forcing every single soldier to make an impossible choice. Your conscience or your life.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about the individual soldier, but now let's look at the bigger picture. This next section is called the fracturing ranks, and this is where the reports really dig into these claims of widespread disobedience and even desertion. And we're not talking about just a few isolated incidents here. The report paints a picture of soldiers literally hiding from their commanders. We're hearing about officers in the elite IRGC, that's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, flat out refusing orders to shoot civilians. And it goes even further, with claims of desertions being so widespread that personnel are just vanishing. Now, the report points to what it calls a key piece of evidence for all this. Apparently, the IRGC's own intelligence organization put out this panicked warning to its troops, only to turn around and frantically delete it moments later. And that move leads the source to this really powerful conclusion, summed up in this quote: "The cover-up is the confession." The argument here is that by yanking that threat back, the IRGC basically showed its own hand. It revealed that it's afraid that a crackdown could trigger the very chaos it's trying to stop. This apparent fear, this panic, leads us straight into our third section, which is all about the regime's panic. It details this alleged scramble to keep control as the very foundations of their power seem to be cracking. So what does that scramble look like? The source lays out this escalating series of what it calls desperate measures. Step 1, you threaten your own troops. When that doesn't work, step 2, you start executing the ones who disobey. And when even that isn't enough, well, the claim is they go to a pretty shocking step 3. They start importing foreign mercenaries. And they're not just throwing around vague ideas here. The numbers in the report are very specific. We're talking about 3,000 Iraqi fighters who allegedly crossed into Iran disguised as religious pilgrims to join up with IRGC bases. And what was their supposed job? To do what Iranian soldiers were refusing to do: suppress their own people. And this paints such a stark contrast, doesn't it? On one side, you've got soldiers who are literally facing execution for following their conscience. And on the other side, the source alleges you have a leadership that's getting ready to bolt, wiring millions and millions of dollars overseas and making sure their family's wealth is secure. Just to give you a sense of the scale of this alleged betrayal, the report flags one absolutely massive number. Citing the U.S. Treasury Secretary, it claims that the Supreme Leader's own son transferred something like $328 million overseas. Just let that sink in for a second. Then there's this quote from an IRGC general, which the source interprets as a pretty stunning admission. He says, "Without the IRGC, there will no longer be a name for Iran." The analysis here is that this basically means the regular army and police can't be trusted anymore. The regime's entire survival now supposedly rests on this one single organization, an organization that itself appears to be fracturing. But this internal crisis isn't happening in a bubble, and that brings us to our next section, closing the walls. This is where all that dissent from the inside collides head-on with some serious pressure from the outside. Yeah, the IRGC has basically become an international pariah. We're talking major world powers, the US, Canada, the European Union, and a whole list of others have all officially designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization. That's effectively putting the regime in a box on the world stage.
And this has very real, very personal consequences for the leadership. Now, every single IRGC commander is a designated terrorist in over a dozen countries. What does that mean? It means their foreign bank accounts, their assets, their properties, they're all being frozen or seized. So those alleged escape routes for all that money being wired out, they're getting shut down one by one. And get this, at the exact same time these financial walls are closing in, a huge military presence pops up on the horizon. The source really emphasizes the timing of this. A second U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, is sent to the region. That dramatically cranks up the military pressure.
So, where is all of this heading? That question brings us to our final section. On the brink of what? This is where all those different threads we've been following, the internal dissent, the leadership's panic, the external pressure, they all converge at what the source is calling a military breaking point. And into this already chaotic situation, you have a direct appeal from the opposition. Reza Pahlavi, who's the son of the last Shah, sent this message directly to Iran's military. And according to the source, this message actually got inside Iran, broadcast on hacked state television. That's a huge sign of deep internal resistance. On top of the crisis of morale, the report claims there's also a crisis with military hardware. Check out these figures. They suggest that out of an original 480 mobile missile launchers, maybe only about 100 are still functional. And this, allegedly, is what Pentagon assessments are calling a closing window for any potential military action. So let's just quickly recap the key points here, because what's being described is really a perfect storm. You've got an army that's allegedly refusing orders, you have foreign fighters on Iranian streets, the leadership is reportedly shipping its money overseas, state media gets hatched to broadcast dissent, there are crippling global sanctions, and, to top it all off, a second U.S. carrier group is sitting right offshore. And all of this, every single piece, leads back to that final, powerful question at the very heart of this report. The loyalty of Iran's military is being tested like never before. And it really forces us all to ask, when an army's loyalty finally breaks, what falls with it?